At the end of the topic, you will be able to list down the different sources of water, explain the steps involved in hydrological cycle in nature, enumerate different forms in which the water is available. Have you heard about the phrase, water everywhere, not a drop to drink? How true it is! Do you know that without water, the earth would look like the moon? Water makes up 83% of our blood, 70% of our brain, and 90% of our lungs. Overall, our bodies are 70% water. People can live several weeks without food, but only a few days without water. The earth is surrounded by large oceans and seas, but the ocean water cannot be used for drinking or for irrigation purposes because it is too salty. Here are some facts about the water present on this earth. About 70% of the earth is covered by water. Of this, 97% is salt water, hence not fit for use. Of the 3% fresh water, about 2% is in the form of glaciers in the North and South Pole, therefore out of reach to man. Less than 1% is the water that is actually used by man for all his needs. Water on the earth is present in different forms. Water is in solid form when it is available as ice or glaciers. In liquid form, it is present in rivers, lakes, pond, canal, and also as groundwater below the soil surface. Water occurs in gaseous state when it is present as water vapor. Water vapor helps to regulate the atmospheric temperature. Water does not remain constant in one form. They constantly interchange their form to keep the balance of water on Earth. But how do they do it? The constant exchange of water between sea, land, and atmosphere in a cyclic manner is known as hydrological cycle or water cycle. Large amount of water evaporates from the seas, rivers, and lakes. This water vapor enters the atmosphere. A major portion of the water vapor is returned to the earth in the form of rain and snow. This water flows on the land and reaches the sea ultimately. Part of this water also enters the groundwater due to infiltration. In this way, the water in different forms gets circulated between different sources, forming the water cycle. Thus, the water changes its forms and maintains a balance in the earth. Click the animation button to view the steps involved in water cycle. Do you know how the water gets back to its original source? May it be land, atmosphere, or sea. There are certain physical processes which help the water in getting back to its source. Click on the buttons to view the description. Evaporation. Evaporation of water from water bodies is caused due to solar radiation. But small amount of this evaporation also occurs during transpiration by plants, respiration by animals, and also during decaying of organic matter. Precipitation. Evaporated water vapor condenses and falls on the earth, a process called as precipitation. Precipitation occurs in the form of rain, snow, or fog runoff. Rainwater runs off across the land and finally reaches the sea. Infiltration. When the water is running off the ground, part of it gets infiltrated from the surface into the ground, becoming a part of the groundwater table. In this topic, you have learnt water vapor in air helps in the maintenance of atmospheric temperature. The constant exchange of water between sea, land, and atmosphere in a cyclic manner is known as hydrological cycle or water cycle. Rain, precipitation, plays a major role in bringing back the water to the source. At the end of the topic, you will be able to identify the source and availability of nitrogen, list down the significance of nitrogen to living organisms, explain the events that occur during the nitrogen cycle. The atmosphere contains about 78% of nitrogen in the form of gas. It is the major gas present in the air. The water bodies like lakes, rivers, and oceans contain nitrogen in the form of nitrates and nitrites. In soil, nitrogen is present in the form of nitrogenous compounds like nitrates, nitrites, and ammonium. Nitrogen is an important constituent of proteins and nucleic acids of all living organisms. Nitrogen is considered to be a macronutrient required for plant growth. Plants cannot utilize nitrogen in its pure form, but in compounded form such as nitrate ions, ammonia, and urea. Animals, being heterotrophs, obtain their nitrogenous compounds from plants. Nitrogen is also present in available form in the animal's excreta, which is used as manure to plants. The cyclic process by which nitrogen element is continuously circulated between the living and non-living components of the biosphere, like atmosphere, soil, water, plants, and animals, is called nitrogen cycle. Let us see the steps involved in nitrogen cycle in the following pages. Nitrogen fixation. Plants obtain their nitrogen in fixed form. The process of conversion of free nitrogen gas into usable compounds of nitrogen, like nitrates, is called nitrogen fixation. Atmospheric fixation. During lightning, the atmospheric nitrogen and oxygen combine to form nitric oxides. The oxides get dissolved in rainwater and enter soil, where it combines with other salts to form nitrates. Industrial fixation. Nitrogen is processed into usable compounds such as ammonium nitrate and urea. These compounds are given to plants in the form of chemical fertilizers. Biological fixation. The nitrogen present in the atmosphere can be converted into usable nitrates by the action of certain bacteria and algae. For example, Rhizobium bacteria present in the root nodules of leguminous plants fix atmospheric nitrogen and convert it to nitrates, which can be used by the plants, and the plants in turn provide nutrition to the bacteria. This type of mutual relationship is called as symbiosis. Plants absorb nitrates and ammonium from the soil and convert them into plant proteins in their protoplasm. This process of conversion of inorganic compounds of nitrogen into organic compounds, which becomes a part of living organisms, is called nitrogen assimilation. The plants are eaten by animals as food. In that way, the animals convert plant proteins into animal proteins and store in their protoplasm. When the plants and animals die, the putrefying bacteria and fungi present in the soil decompose the proteins of dead animals and plants into ammonia. This process of conversion of complex organic compounds like proteins into ammonia is called as ammonification. Nitrification is a process by which ammonia is first converted into nitrite and then to nitrate. This process takes place in two steps. In the first step, ammonia is converted into nitrites by the action of nitrosomonas bacteria. In the second step, the nitrites are converted into nitrates in the soil by the action of bacteria called nitrobacter. The nitrates in the soil are converted into free nitrogen by denitrifying bacteria like Pseudomonas. This process of conversion of nitrate salts present in the soil to free nitrogen gas is called denitrification. The free nitrogen escapes back into the atmosphere, thereby continuing the nitrogen cycle. This is the schematic representation of nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is biologically fixed by many organisms. Here are a few examples for your reference. The non-leguminous plants like alnus and ginkgo also fix atmospheric nitrogen. The nitrogen is also fixed by the blue-green algae. In this topic, you have learnt the atmosphere contains about 78% of nitrogen in the form of gas. Rhizobium bacteria present in the root nodules of leguminous plants fix atmospheric nitrogen and make it available to the plants. The process of conversion of proteins into ammonia is called as ammonification. Nitrification is the process by which ammonia is first converted into nitrite and then to nitrate. At the end of the topic, you will be able to list down the sources and forms of carbon, explain the course of events in carbon cycle. About 0.03 to 0.04% of carbon is present in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide in gaseous form. Oceans have large deposits of carbon as carbonates, that is, limestones, and various salts of bicarbonates, which dissociate to give carbon dioxide that remains dissolved in water. Even fresh water has dissolved carbon dioxide in it. Another important source of carbon is present deep under the soil in the form of peat, highly organic material found in marshy places and consists of highly decaying vegetable matter, coal, petroleum, oil, and gas. In the living organisms, carbon is present in carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. The primary withdrawal of carbon as carbon dioxide from the atmosphere pool is by photosynthesis on land as well as in water. Carbon is a major constituent in all living organisms. The primary life process, photosynthesis, is based on the availability of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Transfer of carbon dioxide between atmosphere and living organisms in a cyclic manner is known as carbon cycle. Click the animation button to view how carbon cycle occurs in nature. The carbon dioxide is replenished by processes such as respiration, decomposition of dead organisms, combustion of fuels, and chemical reactions that give off carbon dioxide from carbonates or limestones. Occasional eruptions of volcanoes also add to the carbon content of the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Thus, there is only one major route of utilization of carbon dioxide that happens during synthesis of food by plants, but several other methods for replenishing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. In this topic, you have learnt about 0.03 to 0.04% of carbon is present in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide in the gaseous form. Occasional eruptions of volcanoes also add to the carbon content of the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Oceans have large deposits of carbon as carbonates, limestones, and various salts of bicarbonates. At the end of the topic, you will be able to list down the sources and forms of oxygen, explain the course of events in the oxygen cycle. Oxygen is the second major element present in the Earth's atmosphere, which constitutes about 21% of the atmospheric gases. Oxygen is present in dissolved form in water bodies like ponds, lakes, rivers, and oceans, which helps in the survival of aquatic organisms. Oxygen exists as a gas in its free molecular form. Oxygen is also present in the compound forms like carbon dioxide and water. In the upper layers of atmosphere, oxygen is converted to ozone. This is another form of oxygen in which each molecule has 3 oxygen atoms. Living organisms like plants, animals, and decomposers use atmospheric oxygen during respiration and give out carbon dioxide and water into their surroundings. Combustion of fuels such as wood, natural gas, and petroleum products also need oxygen. The products of combustion are carbon dioxide and water that goes into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is utilized by green plants to prepare carbohydrates during photosynthesis, and oxygen is liberated as a byproduct. Thus, oxygen used in one form is released back to the atmosphere in many other forms, which helps to maintain its percent in nature, thus forming oxygen cycle. Free oxygen, a byproduct of photosynthesis, is added to the atmosphere. So green plants are the major suppliers of oxygen to the atmosphere. It is therefore important that we grow more trees to protect the oxygen reservoir. As you all know, Earth is the only planet that inhabits life. This is because of the presence of oxygen, which is absent in all other planets.